Thank you for joining us for part two of our episode of domestic violence. We have Tabitha Westbrook with us, who is a licensed therapist, and she's given us a lot of good information.
I'm Natty.
I'm Fida.
And we're here to thrive. Can you talk to us a little bit about how to create that safety plan? What kind of things people should do as part of their safety plan?
Absolutely. So it's going to be different depending on your situation, whether you have kids, what you have access to, all that stuff. If you go to domesticshelters.org, I believe it is, they have an online safety plan that you can create. So it has all the categories. So you could also just Google safety plan. Now, here's the thing. I like you to Google from the library because you don't know who has access to your computer history. Yes. And the last thing you would want to do is domestic violence safety plan. And your abuser goes, I noticed you Googled this. And again, I tell you, it happens more often than we think. Also, your phone, all of those things, it is so easy to track you and to track your online things. So if you are not 1,000% sure, and you might think you're 1,000% sure, I promise you you're not, that no one has access to your stuff, please just go do it from the library or somewhere else. Go to a public place, have a friend do it. Please do not buy books on your shared Kindle account, on your Amazon account, your Barnes and Noble account, any place where it's going to be like, we bought like The Emotionally Destructive Marriage by Leslie Vernick, because that's a whole thing, that puts you in danger. So you want to think about like, how is something I do going to potentially harm me? Right. And look, I know every abuse victim who's at the beginning stages of realizing what's happening is like, oh, if he only knew it was abuse, he'd stop. No, he won't actually. And so please do not leave The Emotionally Destructive Marriage by Leslie Vernick on his nightstand or the Duluth Wheel of Power and Control in the kitchen, because you're going to put yourself in danger. In fact, we do not allow any resource like that to leave our office. I have it laminated so people can't take it with them. I'm like, you can Google it if you want from a public place that is not your home. But I'm not letting you have a copy, because invariably, and again, we call it hopium, right? They want it to be different. I have yet to meet a victim who is like, I really would love my whole marriage to just go up in flames to abuse. That sounds like fun. She's always like, I want him to change. I want good. Right. They want good.
That the marriage is not going to survive. You just think there's going to be hardship and we just have to get through this and we're going to get to the other side.
Right.
But when it's
abuse, if you only knew. Right. If you only got counseling.
The neighborhood I come from, they say, if he's kicking your behind before you say I do, what makes you think he's not going to kick it even more after he gets the paper?
Right.
There are too many women well, I can change him.
No, you cannot.
No, you
cannot change nobody. And you cannot live off of loving crackers. You just can't. It doesn't work that way.
You can't.
Marriage is intentional, right? And it takes both parties. And I think that's why your 40-year marriage has made it, because he is in it as much as you for your good, as much as you're in it for his. And that is the hallmark of mutuality, right? Even if there are bad days, even if there are entire seasons of your life where you're like, if I have to listen to that person snore one more time, I might catch a charge, right? Like, but you don't, right? But what you do is you're like, I let the Holy Spirit live in me. I'm going to go see a girlfriend. You go get a CPAP, my brother, and you figure it out. You know what I'm saying? And so like, those are different things. That's different. And it's not that they are uncaring to how you feel. It's like, well, I mean, I think I have sleep apnea, and you're like, let me make you a doctor's appointment. And that's different, right? Again, it's mutuality. I always tell folks those red flags do not mean it's a carnival. I actually had shirts made for it because I say it so often. So like they're not signaling fun. And you need to listen to them. And in dating, one of the best ways to figure it out is ask about, like disagree with them. Right? Because abusers do not super love to be disagreed with. Right. And give it time. Look, ain't nobody, like, if somebody comes up to you and says, God told me that I'm going to marry you, God better tell you too, because the Holy Spirit lives in you. And you do not have to just take somebody else's word for it. The Bible says to test all spirits, so test that one too. And know that, like, if the desire of your heart is to be married, that is beautiful and it is good. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I do not fault you for that at all. Of course you do. You want to be loved. You want to be pursued, but it is far better to be single and not in an abusive relationship than it is to be single and married, because you really are by yourself when you're married in those situations, and to be harmed. Right. And so take time. Nobody's going to say, I love you after 2 weeks and mean it. Like, not well. You can wait. It's going to be okay, to like let it play out. If this person does love you, they're not going to be like, well, I mean, I already told you, and it's week 3 and you haven't married me yet. Like, I mean, that's a red flag. They're like waving it for you. You need to like be like, you know what? That you go find somebody who's not me. I'm not your person. I'm not your victim. Right. And so those are things that you can, like look at beforehand. Now, if you're like, I got to go, we're talking about safety plans. So I do want to make sure we cover what should be in them. Really think about what you need, what access you have. So some people do have like, go bags where if they have to escape suddenly that they will have like a few things with them. If you create a go bag, these are 2 things I tell everybody because they don't always remember them. Clean underwear and a toothbrush. I can do a lot of things if I have clean underwear and clean teeth. Like, I feel demoralized if I don't have clean underwear and clean teeth. And that is so true of so many people. And it is victims telling me over the years, like, you had to use that go bag, how they're like, I just needed clean underwear. And you're like, so I now just explicitly state, make sure you have clean underwear and a toothbrush. You can do a lot other than that. But, have the things that you need, have copies of documents, access to funds, access to important things like your passport, your birth certificate, those kinds of things, bank statements, anything that you're going to need to help you walk forward. You just want a copy of it somewhere that is safe, and you want to put that go bag safe. Like, putting it in your closet, probably not ideal, right? If he has access to the closet, if your abuser does. So, maybe it stays with a friend or something like that.
Friend or relative.
Right. And please, your sister-in-law, so your sister-in-law might be the most lovely person, but if it is your, abuser's blood relative, and maybe they will prove themselves to be loyal to you, please don't take that chance. I have seen that go south where they're like your best friend until they're not. And so please make yourself safe. If your mama is not a safe person, and is like, well, nobody should ever get divorced. She's going to suffer for Jesus, whatever. Please don't pick that person. If you need like help, shelters are so helpful. And if you're saying, well, I'm not being beaten, they still have lots of information. They may have support groups. They have advocates. There's all kinds of help that you can get, even if you don't need a shelter. And you can start putting together the pieces to say, what do I need to walk forward in a healthy way?
When I was going through my situation, I did a safety plan. And at that time, we were sleeping in different rooms. And I had a lock on mine so that I could sleep. Not that I knew that at any point he was 6 feet, 300 pounds. He could have knocked that door out if he wanted to. But the trunk of my car to this day is a mess. So I can hide anything in there and you will never find it. So if he was to open the trunk of the car, he was not going to
close and go, oh my gosh.
Right. Because it, again, to this day, is a mess. I call it my locker. So under my mess, I had a bag. I had some underwear. I had toothpaste and toothbrush. I had a leash because if at any point I had to leave and I couldn't find the leash to grab her, I could grab her by the collar. I knew she was going to jump in the car. I had a little bowl with dog food because I didn't know where I was going to have to do whatever. I had some cash just in case. I didn't think of my passport and stuff because I didn't think about that at the time. And I was doing it on my own. I was not being guided. And I did know where the closest shelters were, but my boss at the time had noticed some things. And she lived really close to me. And she slid me a piece of paper and she said, this is my address. This is my phone number. If at any point, she didn't talk the situation. She said, if at any point, any day, at any time, you need a place to go, just have this information.
Right. Just in case.
Right. Just, she didn't say anything. She didn't ask me nothing. She just gave me that piece of paper. So I knew in the back of my head that was there, and I had that in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
I had a spare key of my car
Yep.
on the car, because if I couldn't grab my keys, I could go on the where the tire is and grab the
Mm-hmm.
keys. And it's things that, and crazy stuff that you would never think.
Right.
I
Yeah.
remember when I started that, one of the things I did with a friend was my heirlooms, like jewelry that meant something to me that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
wear every day, but it was the ring of my grandmother or the earrings from my mom that if I had to run, I didn't want. And he was someone who would like to, he didn't pawn his shoes because he didn't. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
things would disappear in my house.
Yep.
So one day when he was at work, I put all those things in a bag and I gave them to a friend to keep them in her house until I could, make a decision on
Mm-hmm.
what I was going to do. So, I mean, like you said, that's not for everybody. The one thing I would have added if I had kids would be some, food for the kids, like some bars or, some little
Yep.
packets of
Something to just
something.
take care. Mm-hmm.
Right. But that was my bag. That was my bag. I never had to use it. But that was my bag when I
Yeah.
was
And
when I was taking the thing. Go ahead.
I was
Go
going to
on,
say
babe.
you had all those are all incredible ideas, and I love the leash piece especially.
Mm-hmm.
It has been proven there's a ton of research out there that victims won't leave their pets, and
Mm.
that is one of the things that some shelters are taking into consideration and putting in like kennels and places that you can bring an animal to, because that's a really hard thing. And also, if a victim is rural, right? Like and it's a farm family, there are all kinds of animals that, I mean, obviously it would be, I mean, it's really hard to put a cow in your car, honestly. I mean, unless you have a really large car. But like right. Like if you're like, I can't fit the herd in the back of my Honda. But like, those are things that are really important. And I think like, as we consider as a society, domestic abuse, how do we care for these things? Especially because for the farmers, particularly the Anabaptist community and other rural communities. So I have had the great pleasure of working with Amish and Mennonite survivors and that sort of thing. And, the farm is their livelihood very often. So how are we going to help them, with their livelihood and all of that? And also, if they have to escape quickly and it's a muddy, rainy night, it's real hard to get out of a 35-acre, piece of property, or and the weaponry may not always be things like firearms. They're all manner of farming equipment that can make bad things happen to people. And so these are things that like we want to help people think through, is like, how do you get out, how do you do it safely, how do you protect to the best of your ability any assets that you might have that we need to consider, and then how do we take care of your pets. And so if you're in an area where a shelter isn't possible, like that takes animals isn't possible, but you have a friend that is like, I got to get out, but like, I don't want to leave my cat or my dog. Can you foster for your friend? Could you foster an animal? And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think to ask, because, they don't realize that that's something that they're going to need. And so many places just say no to the animals, but they're such an important part of someone's life. And also for kids, especially, they are very emotionally regulating. When they're in a very difficult situation, to have their dog with them can be very helpful.
That's good. That's good to know. This whole episode is just, if it helps one woman,
Yeah.
or one man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we used to be just women, but now there are more men that's being abused as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember whenever my mom would leave, she left my dad several times, but he would kidnap me out of my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents' front yard, wherever I was. He would kidnap me, take me back home, and call my mom and say, you know what you need to do, which
Yep.
meant you need to come on back because I've got her and
Mm-hmm.
I know how you feel about her. So, you just need to come on back.
Yeah.
And that going back and forth, I didn't even realize until my mom shared it with me numerous times that he would kidnap me and bring me home.
Mm-hmm.
And she would have to come back. And this was in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Women didn't have rights like they have now. The shelters and all that stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of times women were homemakers. They had no
Mm-hmm.
income of their own. The man was the income. He controlled the money, and they felt like they didn't.
But I want to
Mm-hmm.
interject to you in something, and because anybody can be a victim of domestic violence.
Yeah.
I was the breadwinner.
Yeah, she was the
Right.
breadwinner.
I was the breadwinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even though I had control of the money, he had a card and he emptied my bank account, so I did not. But but I was the breadwinner.
Yeah.
And because when I talk about my story, people are like, "You had more education than him. You had a better job.
Mm-hmm.
You we're the breadwinner.
Mm-hmm.
What is wrong with you?" And it's like, it has nothing to do with any of that. You are a counselor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I told you, but I know I've told her. One night when I'm in the middle of my mess, I called the domestic violence hotline, which was what got the ball rolling for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the first words out of my mouth to the lady was, "I know I'm not in a domestic violence situation. I just need somebody to talk to." And she said, "Okay." Okay.
And she went, "Yes, you are. We're about to talk about that, but let's go."
They started there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in mental health for 25 years. So, but when you're in the situation, which once I started getting out, I got pissed off at myself for that same reason. Because I was like, I have counseled women out of this. What? So it really can happen to anybody.
Yes, it can.
It can. And it is subtle. It can be so subtle.
Yes. And I remember having that whole conversation with her. He was working that night, so I drove home with her, and I'm in Georgia. Atlanta traffic can let you have a very long conversation.
Right. It takes an hour to get to Atlanta from Atlanta? I believe I've heard.
Right. So, and when I got home, I stayed in the parking lot because it was a townhouse, and we're talking. I actually kept talking to her, walking the dog. I remember that. And at some point, she told me, you started this conversation saying that you were not in a domestic violence situation. Let me tell you something. You're the poster child of a domestic violence situation. Mm-hmm. And like you were saying, she even explained to me, if he hasn't put his hands on you, doesn't mean physical violence hasn't happened, because he has thrown things at you. Mm-hmm. The fact that that he missed doesn't mean that he wasn't trying to actually hit. You're just good at weaving him up. Mm-hmm. The fact that he threw a punch right above your head in the bed to the headboard, that is physical violence. Mm-hmm. He was trying to tell you the next punch is your head.
Right.
So
he's communicating.
Yes. Yes. And that was things, again, I have a master's degree in the thing. I've been working in the field for 25 years. At the time it was less, but this was 14 years ago. But when you're in it, your psychological makeup, it's traumatized, and it's like, and as a Christian, I married to death do us part, and I am trying, this is going to be okay. This is a season. He's struggling with something. I remember fighting with God and on my knees and saying, me and my house will serve the Lord. I'm declaring this. Why is this not happening?
Right.
And my response to that, I was praying, was like, because I gave him the same freedom I gave you to choose me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And he's not making those choices. He's not choosing. And he's like, oh, okay. So, when you say about the breadwinner, yes, yeah, there's a lot of control there. But I don't want someone to think that because they are the breadwinner, it's not happening to them.
Right. I mean, what access do you have? What do you believe in that moment? Oh, there's so many variables. And I will say, so many women in the church are told God hates divorce from Malachi. And he does. That's true. But if you read in context, go read it for yourself. Don't trust somebody else's interpretation. The Holy Spirit lives in you. I'm fairly certain he can talk to you. Go read it. That verse in Malachi was actually protection for women, because the men at the time were putting women out, trying to get them a younger honey, right? Because they wanted somebody else. And God said, no, thank you. What are you doing? And it is a chastisement against wicked men for the protection of women. And so when you look at that in its context, you're like, wait a second. And there's a verse, I believe it's in 1 Corinthians 7. At this point, I should tattoo it on myself. I can never remember the address, but I quote it all the time. But it says, if anyone among you calls themselves a brother, says they're a Christian, and it gives a whole bunch of things. In the original language, reviler is abuser. And it says, don't even eat with such a one. And that is a hardcore boundary, right? So if we look at those things, it says idolater, sexually immoral, oftentimes we'll see all of those things together in an abusive individual, that you should have a healthy boundary there. And that's a really important space to be. So God supports boundaries. It is not just, suck it up, buttercup, and God hates divorce. It is, God says, no, that was a protection for women. And also, if you're going to say you're a Christian and you're going to be an abuser, you shouldn't even go to dinner with that person.
How does the media play a role in the portrayer or the public understanding on coercive control and domestic violence?
Oh, I have so many opinions on this. Buckle up. Here we go. I hope you're ready for this. Because in case you haven't recognized, I have some strong feelings on certain things. This is one of them.
It's a topic that I have strong feelings on, so go for it.
Yes. So the media does an incredible disservice, honestly. First of all, sometimes and this is probably the worst aspect of it, it can be romanticized. 50 Shades of Grey comes to mind, which I never read because that is not my jam. But so many women read it and were like, oh, that's so romantic. I'm like, the elements of coercion and control and violence and all of that, that's not love, my sister. That is not love. That is exploitation. And we are not to be exploited. I'm not an object for someone to use. I'm a person. And so just that. And a lot of romance novels, if you read them, are very much in that vein. Oh, she said no and she was playing coy. And it's like, no. No means no. And I'm trying to debate whether or not I want to give my spicy version of the definition of consent or whether I want to be less spicy. Do you prefer spice or less spice?
Hey, we are raw here.
We are all adults.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's how I define consent. It is either a hell yes or it's a hell no, and there is nothing in between.
Thank you.
So if it is not a complete yes, it is not yes. Assent because you wouldn't leave me alone is not consent. And anybody who's badgering someone for sexual activity or anything else for that matter, stop. One of the things I was thinking about recently, because as we're recording this, we're heading into spooky season. And so lots of Instagram reels on giant skeletons in your front yard and whatever. But there was this girl who has a degree in mythology, and somebody had asked her a question could a vampire come in if they had a warrant? To search your house warrant, that kind of warrant. And she went through the mythology of it, and she basically came to the conclusion, no, for a few reasons. One was that vampires would have to train in the daylight, which is clearly problematic if you're a vampire, and that you'd have to always be guaranteed night shift. Also a problem because that's not how law enforcement works. And so you do have to invite a vampire in. They can't come in with a warrant. And I thought, vampires know more about consent than some people.
Hello.
So we need to be more like vampires. If you're not invited, the answer is no. And so that, I think, is a really important thing. And that is something that media absolutely does not portray. The absolutely enormous consumption of pornography plays a huge role. Pornography is very much dominating of the other individuals. There's always a stronger individual, whether it's heterosexual pornography, homosexual pornography. It doesn't matter. The more dominant person is dominating a less, able person, basically a less autonomous person. And it shows over and over and over exploitive relationships. And, despite and also a lot of the people are trafficked. Consent in pornography, in general, is just non-existent. And it rewires your brain. I mean, that could be a whole podcast all by itself. But that is what people are consuming from teenagers. The number of teenagers who have Pornhub accounts is really high, and terrifyingly so. There have been articles about young women asking to be strangled during sex with young men, and the boys are like, "What are we doing?" Because that's what they're seeing in pornography, and that seems now normalized. Right. So we have a habituation, which means things that are not normal become normal because we hear about them a bunch, happening in that space. And then, so when you have all of those things, this romanticized outlook of it, oh, this is what love really is. And then, the influence of pornography, it's really easy, to have a completely distorted view of what domestic violence is. And then, without any understanding of coercive control, we're like, oh, well, if somebody is hit, of course that's a problem, but what if they're not hit? What if all of the other elements are there? What if we have coercive control and they're basically a captive in their own home,
and because he's in love with me.
Right. Right. Exactly. Right. No, he's not. Look, if somebody's in love with you, they love you. They are going to celebrate you as a person. Right. If we look at, and I love the research done by Doctors John and Julie Gottman on relationship. They have done more than 40 years of relationship research with tens of thousands of couples. So many couples. It is some of the most robust research out there on what makes healthy relationship. And one of the things that they talk about is making life dreams come true. So if you look at their Sound Relationship House, which you can find online, it gives the different levels. So the bottom two levels are friendship levels. Knowing each other's world, fondness and admiration, that's where we're getting into that mutuality and actually caring for each other. And then you're going to have the positive regard, which means I actually think good of you. And then you're getting into making life dreams come true and all of those things and leaving your legacy. You as a couple, when it's healthy, you want the good of the other person. So if my honey runs marathons, I'm not running unless I'm being chased, and even then it's sketchy, and I'm probably going to be bait in a zombie apocalypse. I've decided my trail name in a zombie apocalypse will be tribute or bait. I'm just going to meet Jesus face to face real quick. So feel free to trip me, get it over with. Right. I'm just bye. I don't have time for that, and I'm not getting anywhere real quick. But if I'm with someone who loves to run marathons, I'm not going to run with them, but I can be their water stop. I can have the bars at mile 15 or whatever unholy number it is, 23, I think it's 26.1 for a marathon. I can be there at the finish line, right? I can support their training schedule. I can do all of those things. If I am into arts and crafts, then they can give me an art room. They can be excited with me at purchases that I make at Michael's or whatever. So there are ways to enter in and to support your personhood and the beautiful things that God has gifted you with that make you you. And instead of trying to cut those down and take those out, they are going to support them and celebrate them. And that is what we want to see more of. And that is what you should be looking for in a relationship. That's the beauty, right? So if they're not doing those things, they're not your person. And if you're married to them and you're like, oh my gosh, they're not doing, oh dear, right? That's a question, and so Leslie Vernick, I just love the way that she puts this because I think it's really helpful. She talks about different types of marriages, right? So there's difficult and disappointing, right? And those are the ones where we had a bunch of kids or a kid. Now we're two ships passing in the night. I used to really like you. Now I feel like roommates. We got to fix this, or we're not communicating well and we're fighting a lot, but there's still mutuality, right? There's not dominance, right? Those are the relationships as a couples therapist I love to see. Come on, let's get that fixed. I got you, right? That doesn't mean there hasn't been a lot of hurt. That doesn't mean there hasn't at times been betrayal. It can even include infidelity, which is a whole other matter. And also betrayal trauma is a thing, a big thing. But if they're like genuinely repentant, again, genuine repentance is a key, then that's a different matter, right? When it's a destructive marriage and they're trying to take out your personhood by controlling you, lying about you, lying to you, that's a game changer. And that is not for couples therapy. That should never sit in front of a couples therapist. It's one of the reasons that I am so adamant about training therapists on the dynamics of abuse. Because, if you don't know and it's sitting in front of you and you're like, wow, I don't understand why I'm not getting anywhere in this couples therapy and I want to scream. It's because it's abusive and it's not going to go anywhere. You don't have mutuality, then it can be incredibly dangerous for the victim. Because everything that's said, everything she tries to do to be vulnerable is going to be weaponized the minute they walk out that door.
If a person is doing something and you tell them that's not good for you or it's hurting you, if they really love you, they'll try to change what they're doing.
Absolutely.
But if they keep doing it, that's not love. That's not love. And we were talking about love is an action word. Okay, well, love is not an adjective, it's an action word. Whether it's marital love or family love or friendship love or whatever, you got to show what your love is, how you're going to show your love. And that's one reason why I like the 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. We went through that with a lot of couples, my husband and I, years ago, because a lot of people didn't know what their love language was. And they wondered why they were not happy. But when you know your partner and you want to do things to make your partner happy or whatever, that's love. But when you're continuously tearing down your partner, you're not good at this, you can't do that, you'll never be good enough. It took me a long time to realize that you don't have to put your hands on a person to be abusive.
Right.
And there are some people today that still feels, okay, well, he hadn't put his hands on me. No. It's about grooming you and coercing you to get to that point. And I love the example you used of the funnel, because it starts off wide. And then by the time you realize you're in it or whatever, it's narrow.
Yep.
At the end.
And then, and you're like, oh my gosh, how did this even happen? Right?
Yeah.
Because it can be a slow progression, and if you had childhood abuse, you grew up in an abusive home, it's your normal, it's your baseline. And so you may not realize it right away also. And I always tell folks who get out of abusive relationships, like, do your healing. Don't dive back in. And it's hard when you've been married a long time or you've been in a relationship a long time and you're lonely. Loneliness is hard, but you are wounded and you are bleeding out into the waters of life. And here's the deal. If you're out there bleeding in the waters of life, what are you going to attract? A shark. Then you're going to be like, why is it chewing on my foot? And so, like, don't attract sharks, man. Like, do your healing so out in the waters of life, you don't have someone chewing on your foot and that you don't end up in another abusive, situation, because nobody wants that. We all want to be in healthy, beautiful relationships. We all want love. And so we want to find the people that are going to be able to do that, and because we're healthy and we know what we're looking for, and those red flags, we're like, that's a no for me. Good luck, Godspeed, but you're not my person.
How can someone who's around someone that you suspect or know that is in a domestic violence situation, friends, family, even church members, how can we support someone who's not ready to get out? Yeah, basically, yeah, and he's in that situation.
So, first of all, know abuse dynamics, right? Like, anybody who's listened to us today has a much better understanding, right? So, this is amazing. Keep getting educated, right? It is. I've been doing this. I'm in my 10th year, almost 11th year of doing this work. And so, I've obviously seen a lot, but, if this is brand new to you, like, go get more education. There are advocacy courses. I will say Call to Peace's faith-based advocacy course is incredible. It is more detailed than most graduate classes I've honestly taken. We are research-based. So all of the latest research is part of it, as well as scripture. So we help you see God's heart in it as well, which helps people go into the church and say, hey, have you considered this? And, and help victims who are suffering, in the church if a pastor needs a little more education and whatnot. But there's lots of, great places to get educated out there. So I would say start with that. Know what it is. Then you don't want to become an abuser yourself. So don't tell the victim what to do. And I know that's so hard, especially if it's somebody you love. You want to say, lace up your tennis shoes and run so fast they catch fire. But that has to be their choice. And so, constantly badgering them, forcing them, all those kinds of things, you're not going to help them. This really does have to be a place they come to on their own. And that can be scary when you see really scary things happening. I mean, we've had clients that were strangled and, we say, hey, that's, we tell them this is like the number one lethality indicator. We're really worried for you. We double check their safety plan. And we've had them say, I'm not ready to go. And so as therapists, we're hyperventilating. We're like, we know that's so bad, right? But it still has to be their choice, And so that's where we really sometimes have to put it in God's hands and just like maintain communication, right? And as a friend, it can be really easy because you're afraid for somebody to just say, I can't see you. I can't talk to you. I'm out. I've already said all the things. And that's the last thing they need because abusers isolate. It is not uncommon for an abuser to start trashing friendships and trying to, make sure there's nobody around the person because then they have full access. And so it's frustrating and as hard as it can be to see someone that you care about in this situation, maintain communication. No matter how long it takes, it is an average of 7 times of leaving and going back before somebody can fully get out, right? So if it's an average, we know some are less and some are more. And that can be really difficult when you love them and you're just like, please go, please, 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 and the risk is that something terrible could happen. But again, it has to be them. They have to be able to make that choice and get to that point because otherwise you are just coercing them into something different and they won't have the autonomy they need to stay gone and to stay out and to do those things. And so that's really important. Being a good listener is really important. I often tell the people that I work with, because they're not, they've had their way of relating be so messed up that they don't know how to friend anymore. And so they're like, I don't know. People want to like do things. I don't know what they need. I don't know what I need. I don't even know who I am. And so, when they need to talk, I say, hey, tell your friend, I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to hold the bag while I verbally vomit. So just be a bag holder, and don't let your own discomfort over a situation you can't fix stop you from entering in. I say the same thing about grief as well. We don't like someone else feeling bad because it makes us feel bad. But when we can sit in the suck with someone, that is one of the greatest gifts, right? The ministry of presence cannot be understated. It is so important. It is so important to be there. And you don't have to fix it. You can just be present. You can be present and you can have resources for when they're ready. And that leads me to know your resources. Know your local shelters, know your local organizations, know the national organizations. Calledtopeace.org. I'm a big fan. They are our primary ministry partner in our practice because they do exactly what they say they're going to do. And they have advocates that are free of charge to a victim. They have all manner of resources. They have church resources. They have all kinds of good support. And you don't have to be a Christian to get an advocate with Called to Peace either. So if you're like, but I'm not a Christian and they're a Christian organization, you don't have to be one. And there's tons of places out there where you can get advocacy and you can get support if you need it. So, know your local resources. Know, like maybe the police department near where this person is. Know good family law attorneys that understand abuse, for when they're ready for a referral. I advocate making friends with lots of people, including the attorneys, to help them understand, because attorneys will often tell you they understand abuse and they don't. They do not understand all those dynamics. And so if you do, you can help them get to the data that can help them represent people well. Talking to lots of churches near you, talking to your own church. So all of these things are things that you can do in advance of someone being ready. And then when they're ready, figure out how to help, right? Can you foster a pet if they have pets? Can you help them out with some gift cards for food or gas or clothing? Can you give them a place to stay? Can you help them get a place to stay? Does the church maybe have, and this is true of like rural churches, sometimes they have a parsonage that the pastor may or may not live in, right? If it's an empty parsonage, can you put them there? Does somebody have an extra house that maybe is an Airbnb that they would mind donating to a ministry or to a church for a season to help somebody get back on their feet? So there's a lot of different things that you can maybe consider that people don't always think about.
Healing and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a lot of years to get over my childhood abuse. Most of the years I felt like I was just going in circles, just existing instead of living and thriving. But when I finally decided to forgive my abuser, I knew I was delivered because when he died 3 years ago, I asked if I could speak at the funeral.
That's
I had
definitely
to have
healing.
closure. I had to have complete closure. And I asked, there was no more anger. When I heard his name or whatever, I didn't get sick to my stomach or break out in a sweat and have a panic attack. I knew God had delivered me from him and from the abuse. And when I spoke, I'm saying to myself while I'm speaking, thank you, Lord. I can truly close this chapter. Because for so many years I thought it was closed, it opened back up, but I was truly delivered. Healing and forgiveness are essential things. Now, when I told my abuser that I forgave him, that didn't mean he was going to sit at my Thanksgiving table.
That's right.
Okay? I had to also learn about that. You forgive someone, you don't have to be in a relationship with them anymore.
Right.
Okay? Forgiveness, not hating, not wanting them to die, not wanting something bad to happen to them, trying to get back to them. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you're going to come to my house and sit at my table with me and my family. No. We're never going to be in the same place at the same time unless we show up at a funeral, a family member's funeral. Okay?
Right.
And there are some people that need to know this, that you forgive someone, you don't have to continue to have a relationship with them. This part of our relationship is over and we both need to move on.
And you need to make sure that it's a safe, you were able to tell the person, I forgive you, even though you're not coming back. But in some cases, you have to do that forgiveness on your own because it's not safe
That is true.
to contact the other person.
Right.
That's
From
true.
afar. Yes.
Right.
So forgiveness is really more for you than it is for the other person in a lot of ways. Right. So, to stay unforgiving and bitter is like drinking poison, hoping someone else dies. It does not work. However, you have to get to a place where you're ready for that. And that does, sometimes you have to wrestle with the hurt and the pain, and you have to reckon with what happened, and you have to get through some of your own healing. And it does not mean reconciliation. And I think this is sometimes where the church gets it wrong. Well, he said he was sorry, and he's doing some different things. And like behavior modification and heart change are not the same thing. Anyone can do anything for 6 months or so, right? Like, I could do anything for just I could, this morning, so I'm camping. And this morning, there was a shower, that I was taking, and there was a spider in there with me, and it was large. He was large. And so my rule about spiders and showers is that the larger the spider, the shorter the shower, right? Because, and your shower time is very much proportionate to the size of the bug in there. And I have curly hair, if you can't see me. So for those who are listening, look, man, stuff gets in there, it might not get out. And so I am very cognizant that spider and I do not need to have a relationship. Right. And so these are important boundaries to have. Right. So am I going to go and pet the spider? I am not. Now, the spider is far less dangerous to me than an abuser. And so I am not going to put myself in harm's way to reconcile. Right. I am going to say it's not appropriate for me to reconcile this relationship because they're still a dangerous person. And just because that spider stayed on his wall in that moment does not mean that at some point he would not choose to jump on my hair. Right. And he's just a spider. He's not nefarious. He's just doing spider things. Abusers are a whole different thing. Right. So they're waiting and biting and using spiritual terms to try to get access to you. Well, I said I was sorry, and I've said, I'm sorry if the things I did hurt you, as opposed to I am truly deeply grieved by the sin and the harm and the devastation I've caused. Those are very different things, with a very, very different attitude. People who are truly repentant, they are not, they like, I would love to reconcile, but I understand if you don't, and I will never pressure you to. Right. That is evidence of heart change. And then they actually don't pressure you. Right. People can say a lot of things. It's their behavior that tells the story. Right. And I believe it's a Maya Angelou quote of when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Right. And your behavior is going to be your largest tell. So if they're saying, yes, I absolutely understand what I've done, and I will adhere to boundaries. And then they're texting you at 3 a.m. about what a terrible wife you are. Their behavior is telling you the truth, right? Their lips are lying. And so I think that's an important thing, is that like, I can say I forgive you, and I can truly forgive you. And what I'm doing is I'm putting you into the hands of God and saying, I'm going to let him deal with it. I'm not dealing with it. That's between you and Jesus. And then I can be free. And you're not taking up space in my head without paying me rent. You know what I'm saying? And so that's a real important thing. Also, sometimes to help my victims, deal with that, we actually write eviction notices to the people in their heads, to the abusive voice in their heads. That is like, but I have to forgive and like forget and I'm like no, And so like we will evict that voice again because they're not helping out and paying rent and all that. And that's an area that like then you have freedom. Like you're saying, like now you're free because you're not encumbered by their junk. That is truly between them and the Lord. And you don't have to mess with it anymore. But you don't have to have a relationship. And you don't have to put yourself in harm's way in the name of forgiveness.
Lastly, Ms. Tabitha, how can Christian organizations and ministries raise awareness about domestic violence and advocate for victims? Are there any initiatives that you believe are particularly effective?
Yes. First of all, they can realize it's a problem. Let's just start there. Because some churches are like, is it really a problem? And the answer is, it is. It really is, including in your church. It's 1 in 3 relationships. So if you want to look out Sunday morning across your congregation and start going, counting people off by threes, you're probably going to pass out. So maybe do that before you start preaching. Second, or at the end of your sermon, whichever. Second is you can get educated. And organizations like Call to Peace, we do something called Protect the Flock, where they will send in an elder or pastor and an advocate. Sometimes I get to be the advocate, which is super fun. And they talk and educate you about the dynamics of abuse and help you understand. And so you can invite anybody. We've done them with area churches. I got to do one in Arkansas earlier this year that had 60 people representing 6 churches across multiple denominations, which was fabulous. And so there are 6 safer churches now in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is fantastic. So you can do that and invite, whomever you like to come to those and learn. And then you can also become a church partner with Call to Peace. And again, I don't get paid for any of this. So I just want to be clear. Like, I'm not getting anything out of this at all, but it's an organization I've seen do really good things. And as a church partner, you do make a donation to them, but you also get access to the advocacy program. You get access to all of their information and to all the support that you need, helping create policies and all kinds of stuff like that. So there's really good organizations like that out there that can really come alongside you and help you understand what's going on. Then, if you don't have a procedure in your church, I encourage you to get one. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, I wonder if my church has a procedure, this is a great question to ask. What would happen if someone told you they were being abused? How does the church respond? And we hear so many things because churches don't always know because they haven't thought it through. And it's not that they're not trying to do the right thing. It's they just didn't even know there was a thing they needed to do. And so if they have multiple services, they'll be like, well, I guess he can go to the first service and you can come to third service. And For the love of all that is holy, why do we not want, do we not? No, we do not need an abusive individual coming to church because, somehow first service is going to run long and they're going to still be there till third service. And then they're going to meet her in the parking lot. And just no, think that through, think through if you're like, well, but how will he know Jesus? I mean, there's the internet. Like, do you live stream? He can watch it.
Church, I don't believe it.
Well, I mean, do we want to abuse? Look, I'm not turning out abusers to other churches either. So, don't send him down the street to First Presbyterian if you're First Baptist. You know what I'm saying? But are you going to disciple him? I mean, you could if you got educated, right? Understand how to enter in with an abuser. Peaceworks is run by Chris Moles. There is a membership group called Peaceworks University, which is really, really affordable. And it is full of pastors and advocates that do this in ministry settings. And all the education you could ever want in your whole entire life is also there. And they'll teach you how to work with abusive individuals, how to enter in as a church, how to do all kinds of things that are so helpful. They do live roundtables where you can ask all your questions. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic ministry. Also, the Men of Peace part, which is the batterer intervention part, is sold out, but the church trauma care track is not. It is Peaceworks Live. It is in October in West Virginia, and it is well worth going to if you are in ministry and want to understand more about this. You're going to get all the theological underpinnings you could ever hope and dream for, and also a ton of education on how to be a trauma-informed church and enter in well to care for victims. And then, register early next year so you can do the Men of Peace track and learn how to run batterer intervention groups and, and understand the why that maybe you would want to do that or have that at your church. And if you're like, I am a church of 75 people, Holy Toledo, that is a small church. Yes, that's actually the average size of church in America. And you still have abuse in your church. And so you still need a policy. It's not going to have all the bells and whistles of a 4,000 person church because you just don't have as many resources. But how do you partner with your community? How do you, partner with the shelters and the providers in your area that do work with victims and perpetrators and all of that? So all of those things are places that churches can become more aware of what's going on. And when the congregation starts asking the questions, if enough of us do it, pastors are going to be like, maybe I should look into that. Right. And then obviously praying that first and foremost, abusers will change. Though it is unlikely, I do believe that some do, and that the Lord can absolutely make that happen. So we can pray for those, right? It says, pray for those who spitefully hurt you. I'm completely butchering that verse, but it does talk about praying for those who don't like you. And who are harmful. And so we can pray for them. Again, that does not mean you hang out with them. It means you pray for them. Yeah. It's totally different. Yes. And how can you protect victims? Right. Do you know your shelters? What can you do? And so I think, there's ample, no matter what size church you are, whether you are a big church, a small church, a home church, a church with 17 campuses and 45 buildings and 10,000 members or whatever, you can be a church that does this right and does it well. And it is my contention that churches should be the safest place on the planet because they should be training people to look like Jesus. That is discipleship. Yes. And Jesus was safe. And if you are not doing that, you probably should look at your overall discipleship program and reevaluate.
Wow. This amazing is not the even the right word.
It's going to take a couple of adjectives for this.
Thank you. That's all I can say.
Amazingly informative.
And no, the doors of this podcast are open for you. But not only they're open, we might knock on yours at some point because you are not only a wealth of knowledge, but a delight to talk to. This has been an incredible conversation.
And we can tell this is in your heart. This is a passion for you because the way you talked about it just came flowing out. So that is awesome. And I thank you, my God,
thank you guys,
for your time, for your knowledge, your passion, your love, everything.
Thank you, Tabitha. We are just grateful that you're here.
Yes.
And we're going to put some resources on our website.
Yes.
And at the end of the description so that our listeners can have them. And we are, like I said, we're so grateful for everything. We hope that, like we said, even if it helps somebody.
Yes.
Somebody either get out of the situation or start evaluating their relationship, or all of us around people. You know, the statistic of 1 in 3 is super alarming. So, I mean, like, if I have 5 houses down my street, at least one of those houses has a situation of domestic violence.
Sadly.
So it's amazing. So it's good to continue to educate ourselves so that we can be light in a dark world.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Tabitha. It's conversations like this that reminds us of the power of faith, community in the healing process. And for anyone listening who might be in a difficult situation, we hope today's discussion has given you the courage to reach out for help.
Thanks for being with us,
Absolutely.
Tabitha, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you guys so much.
Take care. I hope you found this episode helpful. And if you missed part 1, please go back on our YouTube channel, youtube.com at The Rising Muses, and see part 1 of this very important episode. Please subscribe to Thrive by the Rising Muse and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.
And if you are someone that you know need help, don't hesitate to seek help from a trusted professional or a faith leader. Also remember, if you're in a mental health crisis, call 988. If you know someone in a mental health crisis, dial 988 or take them to the nearest emergency room. We just want to let you know that there is a hotline for domestic violence, and it is www.hotline.org, or you can call 800-799-7233 or text 88788. You don't have to stay in the situation that you're in.
Until next time, let your faith guide you through the darkness of times. And don't forget to thrive. Have a blessed day.
Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.